You guys, got another video here for you. In this one we're going to be taking a look at how many watts does my computer use, or how to find out how much wattage you're going to need if you're going to be upgrading. Now this is a Dell Optiplex 7010 and this is a DT version, and they do small form factors and ultra small form factors and MT versions as well. Now you can see there's no power coming through here. What we're going to do is see how much watts are drawn for this little small computer. Now there's a 1050 Ti inside here. Now there's a lot of people that may be concerned about how much power is being drawn and whether it's safe to run the 1050 Ti with this particular type of power supply. So we've just booted up the computer here, and you can see it's now gone to 60 watts, 80 watts, and this is the general boot up process which is going to be drawing power. Now obviously the more taxing stuff and tasks that you do with this computer will draw more power in general, so you just have to bear that in mind when you are doing things on your computer, and how much stuff is plugged in to the actual motherboard as well will determine how much power is being drawn. Now the wattage for the power supply will be broken down into 3.3 volts, 5 volts and 12 volt lines. These are the rails that will be supplying power to all the components inside there. Now each component will have its own amount of power that it will draw, and this will determine how much power overall you're going to need for your power supply. So this is just a basic test. This is not an in-depth test or of any means, but you can see here we've booted up and we are now at the desktop. So I'm going to run some basic tests here. We're just going to run the Heaven benchmark. Now there's no game that's going to tax the system as much as benchmarking software, but basically we're just going to run this and see how much power is being drawn. Now obviously this is just a basic test. We're not using a power supply testing hardware to find out how much power is being drawn, but generally the computer will break down into 3 sections where it will draw power from. So for instance, you'd have 3.3 volts, 5 volts and 12 volts, and each of those rails will deliver power out to the computer components. So you can see we've got 127 watts here. Now the power from the power supply is being distributed around the computer to all the components via its rails, which is 3.3 volts, 5 volts and 12 volt lines. It will distribute all that power around, and of course some will require power, like the GPU and the CPU, and of course also the GPU is taking its power directly from the PCI Express slot, which will probably take around about 75 watts or something along those lines, and you would then have other items in there that are drawing wattage as well. So you can see the whole wattage being drawn so far is around about 135 watts here. And that will go up and down and fluctuate, and of course this is not a scientific sort of testing, it's just a basic test. Now also some graphics cards will require additional power via a cable, but the low profile cards don't require any additional power, so we don't need to worry about that, and it will draw all its power from the PCI Express slot itself. So we don't have to worry about any additional power being delivered here. Now obviously continuous power for this power supply is 250 watts, which means that's its maximum wattage. You can't go above that, otherwise it will become unsafe. So now we're going to run this benchmark here, which is the OCCT, and we're just going to give this the power supply test, and just to see how much wattage is being drawn. Now remember guys, this is only a basic test, so we're just going to run this and just see how much power is being drawn. Now this test is going to use all the cores, all the memory and all the GPU, and we're just going to run this and see what happens and how much wattage is being drawn here from the wall here. So you can see here we've got 136, 139, 140. It's climbing up a little bit here, so you just leave this running and it will give you a general idea of how much wattage is being pulled here. Now remember, you mustn't go above the maximum continuous wattage that you are using, and also the combination of wattage, which is the maximum on the 3.3 volt rail and also the 5 volt rail. You don't want to go over the, I think it's 90 watts for this one, so you don't want to go above 90 watts for those combinations there, otherwise you will run into issues. Okay, now obviously we're running this along here, and this will test everything, And also another thing to take into account is the quality of the power supply: bronze certified, silver, gold, platinum, and also now titanium. So the more efficient they are, the much better they are. So let's zoom in here. I'm just showing you basically it's going to be pulling power from all the cores and all the RAM and also the GPU as well. And that's pretty much it. It's working okay here. As you can see, it's not causing any issues. So it's up to you whether you want to change out the power supply. You can do, and there is ways of doing that, and I'll show you those a little bit later on. But you can see the power being drawn here up to 150. So we're well within our sort of 250 maximum limit here. And this is the power supply here. Now these are not the standard full size power supplies. These are the TFX power supplies. So we can show you those now. I'll show you the specifications of this one on the screen. Now take a look at the specifications here. Maximum continuous combined load on the 5 volt and the 3.3 volt rail. Output should not exceed 90 watts. And also you should see here the 12 volt rail is 17.8 amps. 5 volt rail is 15 amps, and the 3.3 volt rail is 7 amps max. Now the maximum continuous total DC output power should not exceed 250 watts, and that's working within this power supply's safety limits. So just bear that in mind when you're buying these computers. Just check all the power limits and what you should be running a maximum. So just try not to exceed the limits on those. Okay, so the more stuff you plug in, the more that's going to need power. So try to keep within the realms of that power supply. And if you do push it too much, it will exceed. And if you're lucky, it may just shut down. But if it doesn't, it's going to start smoking and then start blowing caps and burning components on the board and also on your computer. Now you can upgrade these, and I'll show you a bit about that a little bit later on. Now looking at the Gigabyte website, this is the GeForce GTX 1050 Ti overclocked low profile version, and if we look at the specifications, they are suggesting that you use a 300 watt power supply. So they're recommending that you use a 300 watt power supply in that system. So it is recommended that they say you should use a 300 watt, and it's entirely up to you whether you want to. But again, the wattage drawn for gameplay, so I just wanted to quickly show you here, 124 watts is being drawn up and down. That will go, and this is the Witcher that's actually playing here. So you can see it's handling the Witcher, and it's only drawing 126 watts for that. So it's not asking vast amounts of power to be drawn when you're playing games, but they are recommending that you use a 300 watt power supply. Now Coolermaster confirmed this by doing their calculations. You can go over to one of these sites and calculate what sort of power supply you would need to run that system. Now obviously they're just dotting all the I's and crossing the T's and just making sure that they're not recommending something below par that would cause a problem, because every power supply is different. And you can see here I've spec'd out my system, what is here, and it's telling me that I need a recommended PSU of 361 watts, and the load wattage would be 311 watts. Now we already know that that's not the case, but their 311 watts is load watts. That is a maximum wattage that the system may consume, and they're saying the word may consume in a typical real world scenario, such as running a modern 3D game and other types of stuff that you may be doing there. So as you can see, it's just a guideline, and you can sort of work that out for yourself, whether you should get a PC with a much more powerful PSU. And it's entirely up to you whether you want to upgrade to a bigger powerful PSU. But sometimes when you're putting stress on the system, like gaming and stuff like that, and you're trying to do it on a smaller system which has a lower wattage power supply, you may be pushing it a bit too much, and it might be a recommendation to upgrade to a much more powerful PSU. But as you can see here, my one was running okay. Even on the Witcher, it was only drawing 125 watts. So in my opinion, I think it's going to be all right. It's not going to be too much of an issue. I've had no problems with it. I've done this before, and I've had no problems running games. But you just may want to have a little bit of a buffer where you've got that extra bit of power. So if you do want to have longevity and a bit of safety, you might want to consider upgrading to another PSU. Now, it may be the cases that you don't think you can upgrade to a PSU, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video, where I'll give you some other options where you can upgrade that PSU. So the best place to get information is from the source, i.e. from Dell themselves. They create a technical guidebook, and so do HP, and a lot of other types of companies will do this for you. So this is turning into a bit of a ramble, but I do want to get this across so you can understand, and other people that stumble across this video will be able to use this information. So you can see here, this is for the technical guidebook for the Dell Optiplex 7010. And you want to go to the table of contents here and look for information. Okay, so you can see here Mini Tower, MT, DT, SFF and also USFF. You need to make sure that you're researching the right type of machine. If you're going to look for specifications, they're going to be all different for each one of these machines. Okay, now my version is the DT version, so it's the one up from the SFF version. Now I have seen videos where people have put in 1050 Ti's in the SFF version. You won't be able to put it in the USFF because it's too small, and you'll run into problems. But you may push it a little bit on this one, but we'll take a look at the specs. So let's go ahead and look here. So what we're looking for is power and 2122. So we're going to go to 2122. And we'll pull this down, and you can see there's loads of good information inside here, color pictures, text and stuff like that. And who you're going to believe? Dell themselves, when they write out beautiful documents like this that give you all the information, rather than some post on the internet or some video on YouTube which they're misleading you. So be very, very careful and go to the source, and you'll get the information that you need. Okay, and if not, ask someone reputable who you trust. So you can see here, it gives you the information here for the for the temperatures and stuff like that. You can see it gives you loads of information. So power consumption, MT, DT, SFF and also USFF. That's ultra small form factor, DT, and the big case. That's the large case that guy was talking about. So it has a 275 watt, the larger one there. So it's not 300 watts, it's 275 watts. And you can go through here and take a look at the specs for that, and it will tell you exactly what's on there. I've got images of that which I've shown you. Now looking at the DT version, it's a 250 watt power supply. So that's 250 watts. So that's basically below the amount of watts that is required by that calculator. Now remember, that's just an average calculation. Also, total efficiency active PFC is 65%. We've already covered the voltages here, and the 3.3 volts is 7 amps, 5.0 volts is 15 amps, and 17.8 amps is on the 12 volt rail. Now also remember, we're running this system with a non-powered graphics card, so that is okay. But if you was on a different type of computer, the maximum total power mustn't exceed that 250 watts. Now if you're running an SFF version, that's 240 watts, and also you would have 60 watts combination of the 3.3 volts and 5.0 volt rails there. So I guess the burning question is, would I upgrade the power supply myself if I was using this all the time and not just for a tutorial or doing some sort of tutorial for you guys? Then yes, I would do. I would upgrade that to a much more bigger power supply to give me that extra added wattage and buffer, just in case I want to start plugging loads of stuff in from the external ports like USB ports. That's all going to draw power, and of course it's going to start causing more problems. So if you are pushing it to its limits, like you would be on the SFF versions, which is lower ampage and also lower wattage here, you may want to consider upgrading the power supply. So remember, all your power supplies are going to be different, and you may want to check your power supply specifications, especially for different types of models which will have different specs. Okay. Now also there's some information here about the shapes and sizes of power supplies, and I wanted to leave that link in the video description as well. So this is Power Supplies 101, a reference of specifications. And what it's going to do is give you a breakdown of every form factor for every power supply out there on the market. And again, that's important because some power supplies are very difficult to change. HP use their own proprietary type of power supply, and it's got 3 different wires that go to power the motherboard, so it's not got a standard 20 to 24 pin plug on there on the actual board itself, so they're not going to be so easy to replace or upgrade. Okay, so just bear that in mind. You have to do again your research and check it out. But you can see here this articles, I'm not going to go through it too long because it's taking ages here, but you can see basically there's loads of information here about power supplies, what year they were introduced, what pins they use, and it will go through and give you the form factor of what that is. Okay, so you can cross-reference here as well. So ours is TFX 12 volt 2002, and this is the power supply that's in mine, and I can show you that in a second, but you can go through here and read all this. I'll leave this information in the video description for you so you can read it at your own leisure. Now, power supply upgrades, a lot of people say that you can't upgrade them and that's it, you're done for, you've got to use the one that's in there. Well, that's not quite true. If you do your research again, you will find power supplies that will actually fit, and you need to get the right power supply with the right dimensions. Okay, and that's going to allow you to upgrade. So even if you are still a bit concerned about the amount of power that's being drawn, then you can always upgrade that power supply to a much more better quality power supply, and that way you will still be able to use that graphics card in that small form factor. So just bear that in mind. Again, there's loads of them out there. This is a 300 watt power supply by BeQuiet, and it's a TFX power supply for this same machine. The dimensions will fit that case, and they will fit in there. You can do your research and measure that out if you want to. I've already done it and I already know. So you can see here we've got 2 rails, and they support 13 amps each. So that's pretty a decent power supply right there. And again, and that's a lot of money, but if you want to use that form factor and you want to be a bit more safer, then you can do. Now, they also do smaller ones than this as well, which will fit into the smaller cases. And I think this size may fit the other size. I need to check. But SilverStone do one too, a 350 watt power supply. Now, these are 80 plus gold certified, so they're decent power supplies. And you can see here, that's 29.17 amps on the 12 volt rail, so that's going to be ample, okay, to run that particular type of card. If you needed to upgrade, you can still upgrade the power supply if you want to use that small case. So if you've bought something by accident and now it doesn't work, then you can still use something like this, a new power supply, to get that card to work in there efficiently. So don't just go and slot it in and start using it and pushing it through its paces, because if it's not capable of handling the amount of power you're asking it to, it will let go and it will cause problems, and it could obviously catch fire or cause an issue with that system. So be very, very careful. So again, the specs for this power supply here, they've got a little fan on this one, as you can see here. And if you want to go to the information, see, like on here, you'll see specifications. It doesn't give you any dimensions, and this is another complaint of mine for websites that are selling products. They don't give you the information that you need, and it's quite frustrating, because that should be on there. And if you go to the manufacturer's website of this power supply here, this is a seller, but if you go to the manufacturer's website, they will give you much more information than what you're going to get on the seller's website, and it will give you all the information here. And you can see here, it's giving you a full breakdown of what's going on here. And again, it will give you the dimensions, which is key for getting the right power supply for the right case, and you should be able to change that out. Now, remember what I said about proprietary power supplies. HP, some of those power supplies will not allow you to change them because they don't have the wire capability. They're different. They're not a 24 pin or a 20 pin power supply. They have different wire combinations on them, and I'll try and get a picture of it right now and show you that. So here is the actual power supply that I was telling you about the Elite desktop, which is the 800G1, but they do the same thing with the 600 and the other versions. You can see the power supply here doesn't have these standard cables on them, so it doesn't have a 24 pin. It has 3 different connectors on it, which are the smaller connectors, the P1, P2, P3 connectors. So if you do buy one of those and you're looking to swap out the power supply, you may run into problems, and you need to find a source that's going to sell a power supply that allow you to upgrade it that has those connectors on it, and you might have a bit of trouble. Okay, so just bear that in mind on some of them, and that's HP, by the way. So just do your research and make sure that if you are buying one of those small form factors or desktops that do have these power supplies in them, some of them you cannot replace. So I just want to give you a few more power supplies here. You can see Seasonic do one 300 TF XL, and this is a 300 watt 80 plus certified bronze, 400 watt plate replacement for your Dell Vostros here, and your Dell 200 S's, 400 and 220 S's SFF TFX, and you can see another one here, Kentech 400 watt. So you've got plenty out there, plenty of choices, and get them changed up and also give yourself a bit of added more power for your system. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this one up. This one's been a long one, so I hope this one's been helpful to you guys. My name is Brian from briartechcomputers.co.uk. Thanks again for watching, and thanks for your continued support. I shall see you again for another video real soon. Bye for now. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the big red subscribe button on my YouTube channel and hit the bell notification button next to that to be notified when we upload new videos.